You're losing a game you don't even know you're playing, and the opponent isn't out there. It's operating your system from the inside. Human suffering isn't accidental, it's algorithmic. Every time you respond to anger, to fear with escape, to desire with compulsive seeking, you're executing pre-programmed code. The ego installed itself as administrator of your biological hardware, and you believe its decisions are yours. This is the paradox nobody wants to face. The voice in your head that you think is you is actually legacy software running patterns installed before you learned to think critically, and it's bankrupting your consciousness one reactive decision at a time. Most people spend their lives trying to win, accumulating validation, defending identities, seeking comfort, avoiding pain, but they're playing by the opponent's rules. And in game theory, when you adopt your adversary's strategy, you've already lost before the first move. The ego has convinced you that its survival is your survival, that its fears are your fears, that its desperate need for external validation is your authentic desire. So you spend decades protecting something that was never under real attack because it never existed as anything solid in the first place. This content won't console you. It won't promise inner peace or personal growth. Buddhism here isn't treated as spiritual comfort. It's treated as what it always was, a technical manual for debugging consciousness. The Buddha wasn't offering therapy when he described dukkha. He was conducting a systems audit. He identified a critical bug in human operating systems, the belief that there's a permanent I worth defending. That bug creates an infinite loop of suffering, and most people never escape it because they never realize they're running faulty code. If you came here seeking comfort, you're in the wrong place. If you came to learn how to hack the code of your own simulation, keep reading. What follows isn't philosophy for intellectual entertainment. It's operational technology for operators willing to dismantle the machine and rebuild consciousness from clean hardware. No promises of happiness, just transfer of tactical knowledge for those ready to stop being played by their own minds. The life you experience isn't a cosmic accident or a spiritual gift. It's an input-output mechanism running in an infinite loop, where each stimulus the system launches, an insult on the street, the loss of something valuable, the desire for recognition, expects a specific response. Buddhism never romanticized this structure as something beautiful or mystical. What the ancient masters called samsara is, in practice, a closed feedback circuit that feeds on your emotional energy. You respond with anger, the system registers it. You seek pleasure, the system notes it. And the more you feed it, the more the cycle perpetuates itself. The fuel that keeps this entire machinery running is simple: attachment and aversion. Every time you lean toward pleasure or move away from pain, you're injecting energy into the system. It doesn't matter if you're seeking validation on social media or avoiding a difficult conversation, the mechanics are identical. The system doesn't care about the content of your reaction, only that you react. It's like a machine learning algorithm. It learns your patterns, identifies your triggers, and adjusts the inputs to ensure you keep processing. Mindfulness here isn't relaxation. It's recognizing that you're being played. Samsara's most sophisticated trap is convincing you that there's a way to win the game. Accumulate achievements, solve all problems, find the right person, reach the ideal position. But this is the operational illusion. While you're trying to win, you're confirming that the game is real. And while you confirm it's real, you remain inside it. Strategic thinking requires perceiving that the only way not to lose is to stop validating the rules. It's not about abandoning responsibilities or becoming a hermit. It's about operating in the world without believing the board is all that exists. Each intense emotion you feel is the system testing your response. When someone insults you and you feel heat rising through your chest, it's not you feeling, it's the circuit being activated. The data arrived, was processed as threat to identity, and now awaits the programmed reaction: defense, attack, or flight. The practical application of self-mastery here is brutal in its simplicity. Recognize the data as data. It's not about suppressing the emotion or pretending it doesn't hurt. It's about refusing to process the input as if it were yours. Look at anger like someone observing a virus running in a sandbox, present, active, but without access to your action's operating system. The greatest adversary you'll ever face isn't waiting in the external world. It's not your boss, your ex, or the political system you despise. The real opponent is already inside, running as administrator on your biological hardware. The ego isn't you, it's legacy software that installed itself so early in your development that you mistake its commands for your own desires. Buddhist philosophy identified this centuries ago, but most people still treat the ego as if it were their authentic self. It's not. It's a program designed to protect an illusion, and it's been running your life with 3 fundamental rules that you've never questioned. Rule 1. You must protect your image at all costs. Every time you feel the urge to defend yourself in an argument you know is pointless, that's not wisdom speaking. That's the ego executing its primary directive. Rule 2. Pleasure is gain, pain is loss. This binary keeps you chasing temporary highs and running from necessary discomfort, ensuring you never build real mental discipline. Rule 3. You are the center of the narrative. The ego convinces you that every event, every interaction, every outcome is about you. Someone cuts you off in traffic, it's personal. A project fails, it's your identity at stake. This self-referential loop is how the ego maintains control, by making everything feel like it matters to you. Here's why you're losing. You're trying to win at samsara using the opponent's tools. You seek happiness to cure sadness, validation to cure insecurity, comfort to cure anxiety. But these are temporary patches on a structural problem. The asymmetry is fatal. You're playing with the ego's rules and finite resources against a system with infinite patience. Game theory teaches that when you adopt your opponent's strategy, you've already lost. The ego has convinced you that its survival is your survival, that its fears are your fears, that its desperate need for validation is your genuine desire. And so you spend decades defending something that was never under attack because it never truly existed. Every time you feel urgency to respond to that comment, to check your phone, to prove someone wrong, to seek immediate comfort, recognize this. It's not you wanting it. It's the ego running its survival protocol. Stoicism understood this distinction between what's in your control and what isn't. But Buddhism goes deeper. It questions whether the you doing the controlling even exists as a solid entity. The practical application is simple, but requires brutal honesty. Next time you feel that hot rush to defend yourself, pause. Ask where this urgency is coming from. Is it wisdom, or is it the Trojan horse inside your walls, executing code written long before you learn to think for yourself? Traditional game theory assumes there's a player seeking profit, making calculated moves to maximize gain. But Buddhist strategy operates on a different premise entirely, one that gives you a tactical advantage the system can't counter. The doctrine of Anatta, or non-self, isn't mystical philosophy meant for monks in robes. It's weaponized insight. If there's no solid I to be hurt, insulted, or validated, you become the player the adversary can't map. The system fires its ammunition, criticism, rejection, failure, but it's aiming at a target that isn't there. And when the target doesn't exist, the bullets pass through empty space. Think about how manipulation works. Someone insults you, and the insult only lands if there's an I that believes it owns the qualities being attacked. You're incompetent only wounds if you've constructed an identity around being competent. Nobody respects you only stings if you've built a self that requires external respect to feel real. Ego death isn't about becoming emotionless or detached from life. It's about recognizing that the self you're defending is a collection of memories, biological reactions, and social conditioning with no central core. When you apply the Siva ties technique to identity itself, you don't become weak. You become impossible to control. The hack is elegant in its simplicity. Without pressure points, the system shoots at nothing. Social manipulation depends on finding your weak spots, what you're insecure about, what you desperately want, what you're terrified of losing. But if you've done the work of investigating Anatta, actually looking for this I that's supposedly running the show, you find only processes, thoughts arising, sensations occurring, emotions flowing, no central owner, no CEO of consciousness sitting in a control room making decisions. Buddhist mindfulness reveals that what you call you is more like weather patterns than a fixed entity, constantly changing, made of countless contributing factors with no independent essence. During your next conflict or criticism, do this. Search intensely for the I being attacked. Not philosophically, physically. Where is it located? Is it in your chest where you feel the tightness? In your head where thoughts race? In your memories of who you think you are? The more honestly you look, the less you find anything solid. Just sensations with stories attached. And when you recognize the absence of the target, the ammunition loses its power. This isn't comfort, it's tactical dissolution. You're not building a stronger self to withstand attacks. You're removing the self entirely, becoming the invisible player in a game designed to target visibility. reactivity. In game theory, a Nash equilibrium occurs when no player changes their strategy because no one sees an advantage in changing, even when the outcome is terrible for everyone involved. Human suffering operates on this exact principle. You're stuck in a low-yield loop, responding to anger with anger, to desire with compulsive seeking, to fear with avoidance. And you stay locked in this pattern not because it works, but because changing feels riskier than continuing. The system has convinced you that your reactive strategies are the only options available. Meanwhile, you're bleeding energy, time, and mental clarity in an equilibrium that benefits no one except the mechanisms keeping you trapped. Every time someone provokes you and you react defensively, you're confirming the equilibrium. They expect defense, you provide it. They feel validated in their attack, and the cycle repeats. Both players are losing, but neither changes strategy because the pattern feels safer than the unknown. Behavioral game theory shows that humans would rather stay in predictable misery than risk the discomfort of breaking the pattern. This is why most people spend entire lifetimes in toxic relationships, dead-end jobs, and self-destructive habits, not because they lack information about what's wrong, but because the Nash equilibrium of suffering has locked them into place. Decision-making becomes automated, and consciousness goes offline. The Dharma operates as what game theorists call an unexpected move, introducing a variable that breaks the equilibrium entirely. That variable is non-action, not passive acceptance or weakness, but the strategic refusal to play your assigned role in the pattern. When the system expects you to defend, and you simply observe the accusation without processing it as personal, you've introduced a bug into the opponent's code. The equilibrium collapses because one player stopped following the script. Strategic Buddhism understands that the most powerful move isn't a better reaction, it's the absence of reaction entirely. You reset the game to conditions where you have operational advantage. Here's your practical drill. Identify your strongest reactive pattern. Maybe you defend yourself immediately when criticized. Maybe you seek distraction the moment anxiety appears. Maybe you argue back when someone challenges you. Next time that trigger fires, introduce 2 minutes of zero response, not suppression and observation. Feel the burn of the impulse without feeding it fuel. Watch how the urge intensifies, peaks, and then starts to dissolve when you refuse to act. You're literally rewriting your response code in real time. This isn't about becoming passive, it's about installing a gap between stimulus and response where consciousness can operate instead of unconscious patterns. That gap is where mental sovereignty lives, and it's the only territory the Nash equilibrium can't occupy. Every mental decision has a cost and a return. Most people operate at a loss their entire lives without ever running the numbers. When someone insults you, you have options. Strategy A, the ego's default. React immediately, defend your honor, prove them wrong. The cost? Energy depletion, stress hormones flooding your system, hours of mental replay, damaged relationships, and a reinforced belief that your identity needs defending. The gain? A momentary feeling of validation for an illusion that will demand defending again tomorrow. Strategy B, the Dharma approach. Observe the raw data without processing it as offense. Cost? Zero. Gain? Preserved energy, maintained clarity, and what Buddhist psychology calls hard lucidity, the ability to see reality without emotional distortion clouding your perception. The problem is that most people never calculate the ROI of their emotional reactions. They spend energy like it's infinite when it's the most finite resource they have. You wake up with a certain amount of mental bandwidth. Every unnecessary reaction, every ego defense, every compulsive thought loop drains that battery. By noon, you're operating on fumes, making poor decisions, snapping at people who don't deserve it, reaching for dopamine hits to compensate for the deficit. Meanwhile, someone practicing operational mindfulness still has a full charge because they didn't waste energy processing neutral data as personal attacks. This isn't spiritual talk. It's basic resource management that determines whether you end each day with capacity or collapse. Think about the last time you spent an hour mentally rehearsing an argument that never happened. Your body released real stress hormones, your cognitive function decreased, your immune system took a hit, all for a simulation. The payoff? Nothing. Literally, zero return on a massive energy investment. Now think about practicing mental discipline, catching that thought loop before it starts, recognizing it as noise, and returning to present reality. Cost of that intervention, 2 seconds of awareness. Gain, an hour of your life back, plus all the energy you didn't burn on fiction. This is the payoff matrix most people never see because they're too busy playing strategy A on autopilot. Before your next emotional reaction, run this calculation. What's the ROI of maintaining this feeling? If someone disrespected you and you're planning to carry that anger for the next 3 hours, what do you gain? Does the anger change what happened? Does it prevent future disrespect? Does it improve your decision-making? If every answer is no or negative, the process should terminate immediately. Not through repression, through pure operational logic. Emotional intelligence isn't about feeling your feelings fully. It's about recognizing when feelings are costing more than they're worth and shutting down unprofitable processes. This is consciousness optimization, and it's the difference between people who have mental sovereignty and people who are run by every stimulus the system launches at them. When a bug appears in your system, anger, anxiety, compulsive desire, you don't indulge it. You don't analyze why you deserve to feel it. You execute the debugging script. Question 1. Where did this data packet originate? Most thoughts aren't yours. They're conditioned responses, biological fear programs, social validation loops running on autopilot. If the thought came from external conditioning or survival instinct, it gets flagged as spam. You're not interested in processing junk mail. This isn't about dismissing legitimate concerns. It's about distinguishing between signal and noise. Self-awareness means knowing the difference between a thought that serves your conscious intent and one that's just legacy code running because it always has. Question 2. Where is the I in this transaction? When you feel insulted, search for the entity being insulted. Is it your body? That's just sensation, tightness, heat, elevated heart rate. Is it your memories? Those are just stored data, not a solid self. Is it your reputation? That's just other people's thoughts which you don't control and never did. Look harder. Find the core I that's actually suffering. You won't find it. What you'll find is a process. Thoughts about reactions to sensations. No central sufferer exists, and when you can't locate the victim, the attack loses its target. This is Anatta practice as a tactical weapon, not philosophy. You're applying the sever ties technique to the illusion of selfhood itself. Question 3. Is this process tactically advantageous? Every sustained emotion consumes resources. What's the return? If you're anxious about a presentation, does the anxiety improve your preparation or just drain the energy you need to perform? If you're angry about being overlooked, does the anger change the situation or just cloud your strategic thinking? Hard lucidity doesn't tolerate system errors that drain battery life. This isn't about being cold or mechanical. It's about treating your consciousness like the precision instrument it is. Buddhist discipline means refusing to run programs that cost more than they deliver. If the ROI is 0 or negative, you terminate the process without sentiment or hesitation. Question 4. What remains if I delete the narrative? Strip away the words, the names, the story you're telling yourself about what happened. What's left? Physically, maybe your heart is beating faster. Maybe there's tension in your shoulders. Maybe you're breathing shallowly. That's it. That's the raw data. Everything else of the interpretation, the meaning, the implications for your identity is software you installed on top of hardware sensations. When you amputate the story, the physical sensation dissolves because it has no narrative fuel to sustain it. Execute this full script on your next intense emotion. Don't skip steps. This isn't therapy or journaling. It's technical debugging of consciousness, and it only works if you treat it with the precision it requires. Everything converges on a single concept, sunyata. Most people hear emptiness and think it means nothing exists, that life is meaningless, that Buddhism is nihilistic philosophy for pessimists. They're wrong. Emptiness doesn't mean absence. It means absence of fixed essence. Nothing exists independently. Everything arises from conditions, depends on other things, and changes constantly. Your ego is empty because it depends on memories, which depend on experiences, which depend on biology, which depends on atoms that weren't even yours a year ago. There's no permanent self to find because the self is a process, not an entity. This isn't depressing. It's the most liberating tactical insight available to consciousness. The strategic vision here is brutal in its clarity. If your ego has no permanent form, it's infinitely moldable. The system can't lock you into a fixed identity if you recognize identity as fluid. You're not an anxious person. Anxiety is a pattern that runs sometimes. You're not someone who always fails. Failure is an outcome that occurred under specific conditions. Sunyata proves you can hack the system because there's nothing solid to prevent you from changing. Most people carry their past like it's welded to their present, but Buddhist philosophy shows that the past is just memory, and memory is just electrochemical activity with no inherent solidity. You're not imprisoned by who you were. You're only imprisoned by believing that who you were is who you are. Think about a cup. It's only useful because its center is empty. If the cup was solid, it couldn't hold anything. Your mind operates the same way. It only functions strategically when it's empty of fixed beliefs, rigid identities, and absolute truths. When you're filled with certainty about who you are and how things should be, there's no room for new information, no space for adaptation, no capacity for strategic thinking. Being empty means the system has nothing to grab onto in you. You become a ghost target. The ego dissolution required isn't about destroying yourself. It's about recognizing you were never the solid thing you thought you were. And once that recognition stabilizes, manipulation loses its leverage. Look at your object of greatest attachment right now. Maybe it's your phone, your car, your relationship, your career identity. Describe it purely as what it is: atoms, functions, temporary arrangements. Your phone is glass, metal, electrical impulses, planned obsolescence. Your relationship is two nervous systems coordinating behaviors based on evolved biological drives and cultural conditioning. Strip away the meaning you've assigned, and what remains? Raw phenomena. When you see the emptiness of the object, that it has no essence making it inherently valuable, the attachment cord gets cut. You can still use the thing, still appreciate it, still engage with it fully, but you're not possessed by it anymore. This is vacuity practice as daily operation, not as abstract meditation. You're training consciousness to see through its own projections and operate from clarity instead of confused grasping. Tactical protocols exist to prevent the ego from hijacking your biological hardware during daily operations. These aren't wellness exercises or self-care rituals. They're firewall installations that run in real time when the system tries to breach your defenses. Protocol 1, firewall of input. When you hit an emotional peak, irritation, anxiety, euphoria, treat every thought for the next 60 seconds as a push notification. Don't open it. Just read the title, System Processing Insecurity. System Processing Anger. The notification will disappear without interaction because you denied it access to your decision-making infrastructure. The ego can't execute commands if you don't grant permissions. This is operational mindfulness, not passive observation. Protocol 2, Agency Audit. During any mechanical task, driving, typing, walking, spend 1 minute searching intensely for the I performing the action. Where is the driver? Your hands move the wheel. Your eyes process visual data. Your body maintains balance, but where's the central operator making it all happen? You won't find one. The body operates autonomously. The I is just a passenger trying to take credit for processes that run without its supervision. Buddhist meditation reveals this constantly. Consciousness witnesses actions, it doesn't author them. When you recognize the absence of the pilot, performance stress evaporates. You're not trying to be good at driving anymore. Driving is just happening, and you're the space where it occurs. Protocol 3, Cache Reset. Between tasks or when you're overloaded, take 60 seconds to delete the narrative. Forget your name, your history, your next 5 steps. Reduce yourself to raw sensory data: sound, breath, pressure on the seat. No story about who you are or where you're going. Just present moment phenomena without interpretation. This is mental debugging through forced reboot. When the system comes back online, it's running clean. No residual anxiety from the last task. No projections about the next one. Just hard lucidity in the immediate moment. Your consciousness operates best when it's not dragging the weight of every accumulated story behind it. Choose one protocol. Execute it 3 times today, whether you think you need it or not. Maintenance is preventive, not reactive. You don't wait for the engine to fail before changing the oil. Most people only attempt mental discipline when they're already in crisis, which is like trying to install antivirus software while the system is crashing. These 60-second interventions work because they're short enough that your ego can't justify skipping them, but potent enough to interrupt automated patterns. Self-mastery isn't built through occasional dramatic efforts. It's constructed through small, consistent disruptions to the programming that runs your life without permission. Execute now. Observe what the system does when you refuse to play along. These aren't wellness tasks or personal development exercises. They're acts of systemic sabotage against the ego's reward architecture. Action 1. Image sabotage, also called social vacuum. When someone misinterprets you or criticizes you unjustly, don't defend yourself. Let the wrong image exist in their mind. This kills the need for external validation at its root. Most people spend enormous energy managing how they're perceived, constantly correcting misunderstandings and defending their character. That's the ego running its protection protocol. When you allow someone to be completely wrong about you without correcting them, you're signaling to your system that identity doesn't depend on others' mirrors. The discomfort you feel is the ego starving. Let it starve. Action 2. Reactive dopamine fast. Identify a common trigger. Checking your phone when you wake up, reaching for coffee before thinking, complaining about traffic. When the impulse fires, observe it for 2 minutes without acting. Don't suppress it, just watch. You're rewriting response code in real time. The gap between stimulus and response is where consciousness lives. Most people are pure input-output algorithms, phone buzzes, hand reaches, dopamine hits. No gap, no choice, no sovereignty. When you install the gap, you stop being a machine that reacts and become an operator who decides. This is non-reactivity training, and it's the difference between being run by your biology and running your biology. Action 3. Authorship dissolution. Complete a difficult task or create something valuable, then tell no one. Don't post it, don't mention it, don't wait for gratitude. This practices action without agent. The ego feeds on credit and recognition. When you perform high-value work and deny it the reward of acknowledgement, you're deliberately starving the I that claims ownership of achievements. What remains is pure efficacy without the parasite of identity attached. Buddhist teachings on Anatta become tangible here. You discover that work gets done, value gets created, and life moves forward whether or not there's an I taking credit. The doer was always optional. Action 4. Tactical discomfort. Embrace. Choose something mildly uncomfortable. Food you don't enjoy but need, cold showers, maintaining posture when your body wants to slouch. Stay with the rigor. This signals to the system that fear of pain is no longer a control mechanism. The ego keeps you compliant by threatening discomfort. When you voluntarily choose discomfort and remain present with it, you're demonstrating that the threat has lost its power. You become a target that samsara can't move through biological manipulation. This isn't masochism. It's strategic desensitization to the leverage points the system uses to keep you obedient. To know whether you're actually hacking the system or just performing spiritual theater, you need to audit your code. These are diagnostic symptoms. If you identify 3 or more, the ego has recovered administrative control. Symptom 1. Justification. You spent the day explaining your actions, either out loud or in imaginary dialogues in your head. Why you did what you did, why you're right, why they're wrong. This is the ego seeking validation, because without constant reinforcement it collapses. The need to justify is the need to exist. When you're operating from mental sovereignty, actions happen and require no defense. You know what you did and why. Other people's understanding is irrelevant data. Symptom 2. Reward anticipation. You only finish the task by promising yourself a prize afterward. Food, entertainment, rest. You're being moved by reactive dopamine, not operational sovereignty. This means you're still running on the ego's fuel system. Avoid pain, seek pleasure. Strategic discipline doesn't need carrots and sticks. The action is the action. It gets done because it's tactically necessary, not because there's a cookie waiting at the end. When you catch yourself negotiating with future rewards, you've reverted to being controlled by biological drives rather than conscious intent. Symptom 3. Thermal reactivity. Someone said something unpleasant, and you felt heat in your face and your pulse accelerate. The eye is still a solid target. It's not empty, as it's flammable. This means you haven't applied the debugging script from earlier. There's still an identity being defended, still an ego that believes insults can damage something real. Buddhist philosophy is clear. If words can wound you, you're still convinced that the self being wounded exists. The thermal reaction is your system's alarm telling you that something you believe is you is under attack. That belief is the vulnerability. Symptom 4. Tomorrow I'll do it. You used impermanence or emptiness as an excuse for laziness. The ego is sophisticated. It will hijack Dharma concepts to protect comfort. Nothing matters anyway becomes permission to avoid discipline. Everything is impermanent becomes justification for not building anything. This is the software pirating Buddhist terminology to maintain control. Real understanding of sunyata doesn't lead to passivity. It leads to ruthless efficiency, because if nothing has inherent meaning, you're free to create meaning through disciplined action without the weight of existential angst slowing you down. Every emotional component has a function in the ecosystem and a corresponding hack in the Dharma. Component 1. Desire. In the ego's architecture, desire functions as an infinite search driver. You want something, you chase it. You get it. The satisfaction lasts hours or days. Then the system generates a new want. It's planned obsolescence built into consciousness. The Dharma hack is recognizing desire as a software error, not a legitimate need. When you see craving arise, you don't fulfill it or suppress it. You observe it as faulty code, trying to convince you that happiness exists in the next acquisition. The technical result is the end of emotional obsolescence. You stop upgrading to the next desire because you've debugged the program that generates them. Component 2. Attachment. The ego uses attachment as a false stability anchor. You attach to people, possessions, identities, beliefs, and the ego tells you this creates security. But attachment is actually a vulnerability point. Every attachment is a handle the system can grab to manipulate you. The Dharma applies the sever ties technique, cutting the cords without destroying the relationships or discarding the objects. You can love someone without being attached. You can use something without needing it. The result is total mobility of consciousness. Nothing holds you in place when you need to move, adapt, or let go. You operate with strategic detachment, which is the opposite of cold indifference. It's warm engagement without dependency. Component 3. Suffering. In the ego system, suffering functions as a hardware failure alarm. Something hurts, and the ego interprets this as reality is wrong and must be fixed immediately. This generates resistance, which amplifies the pain. The Dharma hack is reducing resistance to zero, not by accepting suffering as good, but by recognizing that resistance costs more than the original pain. When you stop fighting what's already happening, the suffering loses its secondary layer, the story about how it shouldn't be happening. What remains is just raw sensation, which the body processes and releases naturally. Technical result: dissolution of the negative data. Pain still occurs, but suffering, the mental multiplication of pain, stops. Component 4. Identity. The ego uses identity as a firewall, protecting you from raw reality by filtering everything through "this is who I am." The Dharma hack is firewall deactivation through emptiness recognition. When you see that identity is just accumulated conditioning with no solid core, the firewall drops. You gain direct access to reality without the distortion of self-reference. Everything stops being about you, which paradoxically makes you more effective because you're not wasting processing power on self-protection. Memorize this table. Next time you detect one of these components activating, consult the corresponding hack mentally and execute. This is consciousness optimization through systematic debugging, not philosophical contemplation. Reality is programmable. Everything you feel is code. If it's code, it can be debugged. This is the fundamental axiom of consciousness engineering, and it's not a metaphor. Your thoughts follow patterns, your emotions run on triggers, your behaviors loop on algorithms installed during childhood. None of this is fixed. Systems thinking Buddhism treats the mind as editable software running on biological hardware. The hardware has limitations. You need sleep, food, oxygen, but the software is completely open source. You have full administrator access. Most people never realize they can rewrite their own code because they've been told that personality is destiny, that this is just how I am, that change is slow and difficult. Those are lies the system tells to keep you running default settings. Command Central is what we call hard lucidity. Never accept a thought as yours without running it through the firewall first. Your mind operates like radar. Signals come in constantly, most of them noise. Your job is to identify each signal, classify it as either samsara noise or useful data, and discard everything else. This isn't paranoia, it's signal processing. Most thoughts are junk, recycled fears, social conditioning, biological impulses dressed up as rational decisions. When you treat your mind as a radar screen instead of a trustworthy narrator, you stop being manipulated by your own thought patterns. You become the observer running quality control, not the victim believing every broadcast. The tactical maneuver is sever ties. Cut the need to be right. Cut the search for easy comfort. Cut the illusion of a solid I that needs protecting. When you become empty in the Buddhist sense, you remove every hook that fate and society use for manipulation. They can't threaten what doesn't exist. They can't tempt what isn't grasping. They can't insult what has no fixed identity to defend. This is ego dissolution as armor, not vulnerability. You're not becoming weak by letting go. You're becoming untouchable by removing the target. Mental discipline at this level means you stop fighting battles on terms the opponent designed. You change the rules by refusing to validate that the game is real. The game rule is non-reactivity. Samsara only wins if you react according to the expected algorithm. Input arrives, Ego generates automatic response, system logs the data, and adjusts for next time. But you can introduce the gap, absolute silence between stimulus and response. In that gap lives freedom. The person who reacts is a robot executing programming. The person who observes, then consciously decides, is sovereign. This is where all the protocols converge. When you can maintain the gap under pressure, you've achieved operational sovereignty. The only real victory isn't winning the game by reaching the end of the board. It's recognizing the board is illusion and the player never existed as anything more than a useful fiction you can discard when it stops serving you. The prison door is open, but it's too narrow for your ego to pass through. What you just received wasn't a sermon about inner peace or personal development. It was tactical weaponry against the system controlling your consciousness from within. You now have the protocols, the debugging scripts, the hacks that dismantle the illusion of the solid self. But knowledge without execution is just more noise. The world will attempt to pull you back into the game. Your ego will whisper that this rigor is unnecessary, that comfort is wiser than lucidity, that you can start tomorrow. That's the system trying to recover its fugitive slave. You now see with clarity what most people will never perceive. The I you've been defending is just an interface, not the hardware. Suffering is a processing error, not destiny. Freedom isn't found in conquering the external world. It's found in dismantling the internal simulation that convinced you the world was the problem. Strategic thinking requires recognizing that every emotional reaction is negotiable, every identity is provisional, every desire is optional. You're not imprisoned by circumstances. You're imprisoned by believing that the prisoner is real. What must be sustained now is maintenance through the protocols, rigor as your only measurement tool, emptiness as your default operational state, systematic refusal to play by the opponent's rules. The conscious elite isn't those who never make errors, it's those whose time between error and correction approaches zero. Every time you catch yourself justifying, seeking validation, or running on reactive dopamine, you execute the patch immediately. No guilt, no self-judgment, just technical correction. Mental sovereignty is built through 10,000 small interruptions to automated programming, not through occasional dramatic transformations. Here's what separates the aware from the asleep. The aware recognize that this isn't about becoming a better version of yourself. It's about recognizing there was never a fixed self to improve. You're not upgrading the ego, you're uninstalling it. You're not strengthening identity, you're seeing through it. And when you operate from that recognition, manipulation loses its leverage, suffering loses its multiplication factor, and the game loses its power to trap you. Don't argue with the system. Don't try to convince others, just operate. Become no one, become the void. And for the first time in your existence, take absolute command of the machine. Debugging session complete. Initiating sovereign mode. If you made it here, you're no longer a spectator. You're a dissident in training. Your first mission, execute one 60-second protocol in the next 24 hours. Not all of them, just one. Firewall of input, agency audit, or cache reset. Choose, execute. Observe how the system reacts when you refuse to play along. Notice the discomfort, the resistance, the ego trying to reclaim control. That discomfort is confirmation you're doing it right. Your second mission, identify which of the 5 compromise symptoms you exhibited today. Justification, reward anticipation, thermal reactivity. Apply the correction patch tomorrow. The speed at which you detect and correct errors defines your sovereignty rate. This isn't about perfection, it's about reducing the lag time between unconscious reaction and conscious intervention. Every cycle you shorten, you gain ground. Subscribe if you want to continue the training. We don't promise happiness here. We transfer consciousness technology. We don't sell comfort. We build capacity. This channel exists for operators willing to debug their minds with the same precision they debug any other system. Activate notifications if you're committed to the discipline. Skip it if you're still looking for motivational content that makes you feel good without demanding change. The dissidents know the difference.